Hello to those of you just joining in. We are just waiting for Dr. Desai to join really quickly, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Hey,
Hello.
Dr. Desai.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. How's everything in Michigan?
Good, good. We're finally starting to get some fall weather, and it's starting to cool off here, so it's nice. It was really
Great.
hot this past week. It was in like the 80s, so which is not
Oh,
normal for us in October. So
have the leaves started changing colors?
they have, yes.
So that's a really nice time of the year to be up in Michigan.
Yeah, it's my favorite time of year is fall time here. It's nice to live somewhere where you get to experience all four seasons. So I'm grateful for that. So how's the weather over there in Texas? I'm sure it's been hot.
It has been during the day, but in the mornings, what's been nice, Alyssa, is that it's been cooler, and it's always nice when that hot Houston summer transitions into the fall because October, November are really nice months here.
Yeah, absolutely. My friend, she lives in Texas, so she keeps me updated in all the weather things, and she actually lives in Waco, so I know they get a lot of tornadoes and stuff there. So
Well, hopefully those stay away.
yeah, definitely. So, okay, so everybody is trickling in. So I think we can go ahead and just get started with some introductions. So I will go ahead and start us off. So hello, and thank you all for joining us for our webinar series, Residency Real Talk with Dr. Desai. We're very happy to have you here tonight, and we're looking forward to answering some of the Google questions that you'd submitted on our Google form. I myself, just so you can put a name to a face, my name is Alyssa Harlow, and I am the Director of Marketing here at MD2B Connect. I'm sure that we've spoken via email or some other way, shape, or form, so now you can put a name to a face. So basically, before we get into it tonight, I did want to mention that our team is here for you for anything that you may need, not just for the rotation process or during your rotations. If you have any questions or you have any doubts that you need answered, or maybe you're looking for guidance, everybody on our team is here and dedicated to you and your success. So please feel free to reach out to any of us, including Dr. Desai. You'll be able to get his contact number during the rotation. And we are always more than happy to have a conversation with you, answer some questions, and clear up any concerns that you have. Lastly, I did want to mention that I will be sharing various links and videos and other resources for you in the chat to use. Feel free to save those. I'll be kind of interspersing them with the questions that we get tonight and that we will answer. So feel free to use those. And I think that's it. So without further ado, I will pass it over to you, Dr. Desai.
Okay, thank you so much, Alyssa. A very warm welcome to all of you out there. We're here in October, and as we do on Residency Real Talk, we try to cover things that are very topical. I know many of you are currently applying for residency, so for those of you who are doing that, we wish you all the best. We want you to know that we're here for you, ready to support you. The way we've created our MD2B Connect program is we believe that that it's not just about clinical experience. It's about giving you what we've learned from our experience. Me myself, I have over 25 years of experience serving on a residency selection committee at several different institutions, and so I stay current with everything that's going on. I do a lot of research in this area. I attend conferences, I speak to program directors, I give talks at different institutions. And so I try to stay current so that I can bring you as much as I can to our program, either when I speak with you one-on-one, when we talk about your unique situation, or through these webinars where we can cover these different topical items. At MD2B Connect, we have a lot of resources. We'll be touching upon those, as Alyssa said, throughout this webinar. A bit more of our focus today is going to be on the residency interview, but many of you submitted questions about other things as well. So we're going to cover a lot of different things, but I'm going to open this up by talking initially about the residency interview, since that's on everybody's minds, or most of your minds, and then we'll cover other things as well. If you don't see your questions answered today, it's not because they're not important to me. They are very important to me, but sometimes it's better for me to address your questions one-on-one. If there's something super specific to you, it may be easier for me to talk to you one-on-one. And as Alyssa said, part of our program is for me to be there for you for these one-on-one chats. I make it a point to get to know each and every one of you. And once we open up the lines of communication between me and you, you're always welcome to reach out. In fact, I encourage you to reach out to keep me aware of how you're progressing, whether you're applying right now or not. It's great for me to hear about what you're doing. I'm always excited about the victories you're experiencing, the accomplishments that have occurred in your life. And I'm also there for any uncertainties or doubts or questions that will come up during the process. So please do keep in touch with me. Know that I'm here for you and ready to help you whenever you need it. So Alyssa, with that in mind, I'm going to share my screen. So if there's anything you want to share while I work on sharing the screen, feel free to share that with the group.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I just wanted to mention that we do have a couple free resources on our website. So we do have a residency programs, IMG friendly residency programs tool on our website that can be useful for you. I will go ahead and share it in the chat here so that way you have the link to that. But that's also on our website. So it might be important to you during this time to take a look at that. Also, I'll share some additional resources in here, such as Frida, as well as the Residency Explorer link, so that way you guys can use that as well.
Okay, great. Alyssa, do you see my screen?
Yeah, do you want to advance to the next slide just to make sure?
Yeah, were you able to see the second slide?
Yeah, and if you guys have any issues, just please let us know in the chat, any audio or visual issues. Feel free to let us know, and then we can try and fix that. But I think for the most part, we're good.
Okay, great. So let's get into it. We are, as we said, in October 2025. I often like to start these Residency Real Talks by talking about what we should focus on since it is October 2025. So as I said, most of you are currently applying. And what is it that we need to be doing as an applicant? Well, if you haven't submitted your application for whatever reason, we want to make that our priority. So please be sure to get your application out. If you're having some difficulty doing that and you're not sure what to do or you feel a bit lost, definitely reach out to me. But that is our number one priority, is to get that application out as soon as possible. Now, in a perfect world, we would have everything aligned right before we apply, right? We would have our application done. We would have all of our letters uploaded, ready to go. We would have our ECFMG certification. All of these things, right, would be ready to go. But no matter how hard we try, sometimes things are out of our control. So sometimes there's an item or two that might be pending at the time that we apply. So if those items are now available, it is important to update the programs. Some programs will, when they receive your application, will download everything, and they will be notified, these programs will, about new updates, but that doesn't mean that they always download the new items. So sometimes they need a little bit of prompting and an email coming from you letting them know that a step score is available or a new LOR is now in the system can be exactly what is needed for them to take that action. And that may be the item that is needed for you to get that interview consideration and land that interview. So do update programs with items of interest. Networking, we've talked about this before. You've heard about this not only from me, but from other sources. It is important It can help us get interviews. And even though we're here in October 2025 and most of you have submitted your application, networking can still be effective in helping turn your interest in the form of an application into an interview. So if you are in the process of networking, have built up some contacts, don't let up right now. Keep doing this. Remember that October and November are your biggest months for interview invitations. And so the networking that you do over these next few months can still pay off even after you've submitted your application. Now, you may have, through this process, amassed some advocates, people who may be willing to help you in different ways. Well, this is the time to ask them to take actions that will benefit you. So if you have been networking, for example, and you have some seniors or some alumni, or you have other contacts that have expressed an interest in supporting you at programs where they have ties, this is the time to mobilize them. Now, keep in mind that some of these people are very, very busy. Residents are busy, attendings are busy, and you want to make it as easy as possible for them to advocate for you. So find out, what they can do for you and what they need from you. Sometimes an attending might just need a short email from you to get things started, and they can use your email to kind of modify their own email. And that might move things forward and get that advocacy to happen sooner rather than later. Letters of interest. We're going to talk a little bit more about that because there were several questions about it, but these are things that you can start writing and sending, and more on that to come. And then, of course, we should be preparing for interviews. So the months of October, November, December, January, even into February are months where programs will interview applicants. So I encourage you, even if you haven't yet heard from programs, which is the bulk of the applicants out there, we're just a couple weeks into this interview season, so most people haven't gotten interviews yet, or if they have, maybe it's one or two. So very early in this process, but you never know when you get an invitation, and you'll have to have a fast turnaround time. Although I usually advocate that people don't take October interviews, sometimes programs don't give you that flexibility. So when they release some dates for you, maybe the only thing you have to choose among are October dates, which is why it's important to prepare for interviews before you even get the actual interview. That way, if you have a short turnaround time, you're on your way to making a good impression because you've been preparing. So more on preparing for interviews here in a sec. Before we talk about some tips for preparing, let's look at the goals that we have for the residency interview from the perspective of the programs and the applicants. So the program has certain goals. So the top goal is to identify applicants who will be successful residents in their program. So if you've gotten an interview invitation, they've already deemed that you're the type of person that would be, in their view, successful as a trainee in their program. But now in an interview, it's time to bring that to life through your ability to talk about yourself, your background, and what you have to offer. So one of the top goals a program has is to assess your readiness to be successful as a trainee in their program. Now, they are also interested in bringing trainees into their program who are aligned with the program's mission. So this is a concept that you are all familiar with, which is called the concept of fit. And you hear that term again and again, but it is important to programs, and every program has its own mission. So it's very, very important that you ascertain what that mission is and think very carefully about what it is in your background and your experience that dovetails nicely with the program's mission, because that's a key part of preparing your interview for a particular program. And the program is also trying to determine, again, if you have the qualities and skills that match what is important to the institution. Now, from an applicant's perspective, it mirrors to a large extent what the program's goals are. So the program is looking for evidence that you're successful. You are trying to show them that you have the qualities and skills that will allow you to be successful. In addition, this is also something important, but doesn't get as much attention. Your opportunity to interview at a program is a chance for you to assess the program and determine if this is a program that would allow you to thrive. And that's an important part of interviewing as well. So as much as you think about interviewing being all about impressing the program, and obviously that's a big part of it, this is also an opportunity for you to see if you'd like to be a resident there. And my hope is, of course, that you have many, many interviews coming up for this interview season so that you'll have a lot of potential choices. And you'll have to, of course, at the end of the interview season, decide how to rank those programs. And so your opportunity interview will give you an idea if that program aligns with what you want in a training program and in your career. Now let's get into some tips. My first tip that I want to share with you is the importance of extensively researching the program. This is important. If you ask every interviewee how important this is, every single person would say, absolutely, Dr. Desai, this is important. Yet my experience has shown me over 25 years, and it doesn't matter where you're talking about a USMD, USDO, or an IMG applicant, very few applicants research the program as extensively as they should. And even when applicants research the program in depth, they don't always use it strategically to guide their interview prep and really show the programs how much of a fit they are. So your objective in researching a program is to know as much as you can about the program, absolutely, but to use that information wisely in creating your interview answers and showing them that you're a good fit. And we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. But first, I want to draw your attention to how to research a program. So the typical thing that an applicant does is they look at a program's website. And we all would agree that programs vary considerably on the quality and quantity of information that they provide on a website. Some programs have very little information, on the order of 1, 2, 3 pages. Other programs are chock full of information, and then you have everything in between those extremes. And so, of course, you want to start your research with the program's website, but you don't want to stop there. Every residency program is housed on a larger departmental website. So you want to review all the pages of the larger departmental website because there's often information there that is pertinent to the training program. Remember that some of these residency programs are attached to a medical school. And if they're not completely attached to a medical school, they may be affiliated with a medical school. So sometimes there's information about a residency program on the medical school website. Keep in mind also that there may be a separate hospital website, and you will want to explore the hospital website as well because it is complementary to what may be found on a program or departmental website. I'll give you an example of my own institution. So I'm a professor at the Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas. We have a very large internal medicine residency program, and we do not have one hospital. We have multiple hospitals where our residents train. And so you can find important information about our residency program, not only on our program website, but also on our Baylor College of Medicine medical school website, our different hospital websites. For example, I, as a faculty member, I'm mainly housed at the Michael E. DeBakey VA Hospital, which is one of Baylor's main teaching hospitals. So our internal medicine residents spend quite a bit of time at our VA hospital. So you will learn things about our program by perusing the VA hospital website. The same thing can be said about our sister hospitals, whether it's Ben Taub, which is our county hospital, primarily serving the underserved, or MD Anderson, which is our cancer hospital, or Baylor St. Luke's Hospital. These are all hospitals where our trainees spend time. They all have their own websites. So I encourage all of you to visit the different websites that pertain to the program where you'll be interviewing. Now, when you're visiting these websites, don't only look at the departmental website or program website, look also at the news section. The news section is where things that an institution is particularly proud of is going to be featured. It's often updated more frequently than a program or departmental website. So if there's something exciting going on at that particular institution, it'll be often featured in the news section. So always click on the news section, which you'll always typically find on the menu bar or at the bottom in the footer of the website. We don't want you to stop there. We want you to research even beyond the official websites. We want you to do a thorough internet search and go past the first or two, couple pages of Google or whatever your search engine is, because there is a lot of information out there on different programs. And so the more searching you do, the more knowledge you gain. And of course, in this day and age, a lot of programs are on social media. And so they're putting out information on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever it is. So scour those pages as well. Don't neglect a PubMed search. Remember that the leadership of a lot of these residency programs, they publish, and they may publish educational research. So they may study something at their particular program, and they may report whatever it is that they find through educational research articles. So if you search the program director or the associate program director or other core faculty members, you may find valuable things about the program that aren't necessarily featured on their website. And then finally, last but not least, is the importance of talking to people. So if you have alumni or seniors at these programs, by all means, reach out to them to get their perspective. There's nothing more useful in your research than firsthand thoughts from people who are living, breathing that residency program. So definitely reach out to people. Let's move on to the second tip. So as important as it is to know the program, it's vital also that you know yourself. And remember that anything on your application is fair game for an interviewer. So what that means is you have to go through your application with a fine-tooth comb. Every line of your application, you have to ask yourself, if they ask me about this, what will I say? So that means if you've created descriptions for your ERAS experiences, let's say you did a rotation somewhere, or let's say you one of your experiences is a volunteer experience or a leadership experience. Anything that you've written there is possible that you might be asked about it. So if you have 6 bullet points on a U.S. clinical experience, and bullet point 5 is something about a presentation you gave. Let's say you gave a presentation on CLL. That could be asked of you. So anything that you put in there, you have to be ready to talk about. And so it's very important that you review your application. A lot of people have difficulty talking about their research. Again, this spans all applicant types. When I interview applicants for our Baylor internal medicine residency program, so many people have a hard time talking about their research. So you have to not only be able to talk about your research, but to talk about every project you've been in, every publication you've participated in, because you don't know what the interviewer is going to be interested in. I just got through doing a one-on-one mock interview with a fellowship applicant. And this applicant was applying for hematology oncology and was very excited about an interview that she had at an Ivy League institution. And she had a quite productive career in research, had a lot of publications. And I asked her this question as we were talking about, how to talk about your research in a fellowship interview. And I asked her, I said, what are the publications or projects that you've been involved in that you would be afraid to talk about today if somebody asked you about it? And she mentioned several. And one of them was a publication that she had done maybe 7 or 8 years ago. So she hadn't really thought about it in a long time. Plus, it was in an area very different than what she had been focusing on over the last 3 or 4 years. And there was another paper that she was involved in where she was, had an important role, but there were other aspects of the paper that, she wasn't really involved in. And so I reminded her how important it was to review those papers. And sure enough, at that institution, they asked her about one of those papers. So she was very glad to have done that. And that's what I would encourage all of you to do, is whatever you need to do to get up to speed on any research you've been involved in, this is the time to do it, because you just don't know what they're going to ask you. It's also important to know yourself as it relates to the personal statement. The personal statement is something that a lot of interviewers will read right before they interview you. It will often be a stepping point for the interview. And so if you haven't read it in some time, it may not be completely fresh in your mind. And again, just like with the application, where you need to go line by line through your application to ready yourself for any questions about your experiences, you have to do the same thing for your personal statement. That's something that you don't want to minimize, because they may ask you about how you felt about something that you wrote. And they may ask you why you chose to use a certain word in your personal statement. I know that sounds like, oh my goodness, Dr. Desai, would they actually do that? The answer is they might. So if you've used a certain word, and maybe that's not a word that you typically use, but you thought it was the right adjective, you've got to remind yourself what that adjective is and what it means and why you used it. So that's how exhaustive your review has to be in terms of knowing yourself. Now, how do you do this? How do you know yourself to such a great depth? Well, of course, you already know yourself to that depth. But the challenge in an interview is we don't often talk about ourselves this way. So it's very hard to do this, because in our normal day-to-day conversation, we're not answering interview questions. So we know ourselves, of course, but we have to practice our answers. And the practice first starts with reflection and analysis. So we need to think about each of our experiences and ask ourselves a lot of questions. So I divide those questions into 2 types. First are the basic questions, and the second are the most advanced questions. So for every experience you have on your application, the basic questions are things like, what did you do? Why did you do it? Where did you do it? When did you do it? How did you do it? Now, why do I want you to ask these basic questions? The reason I want you to ask yourself these basic questions is some interviewers will fact check things in your application. There are applicants who embellish or exaggerate their application. And so some interviewers may do some fact checking. So if you cannot remember when you did a rotation, that may just be because you forgot the exact month you did the rotation, but that's not a good look, right? That could call into question, some of the other things you've written in your application. So that's why you have to go through your basics. So if your dates of your research were from June 2022 to July 2024, you have to remember that. And you have to be ready to say that if they say, hey, when did you do your research? Because that's what's in your application. So remember, some interviewers can do fact checking with you. And when people have trouble answering these questions, often it's not because they're exaggerating or embellishing. They just haven't thought again about these basics. So that's why you start with a basic set of questions for every experience that you've done. And then you ask yourself some advanced questions. These are questions that will help you generate content that will be viewed as meaningful in your interview answers. So those are questions like, through this experience, what did I learn about myself? How did this experience impact me? Through this experience, how did my involvement highlight personal qualities? What does the experience say about my motivations, interests, work ethic, and drive? What are some obstacles I experienced during the experience, and how did I overcome them? And what did I learn about medicine or whatever specialty that you're applying for through this experience? So this is an important exercise to do. If you do this for all of your experiences, you're going to be in better shape for crafting stronger answers to these interview questions. Now, tip number 4 is related to tip number 3, and it's called follow the 40-60 rule. So what does this mean? So when you're answering questions, when you're creating strong answers to your questions, you've got to strike a balance between being factual in terms of what you did with content that reveals something about you as a person, as a professional. So what we see a lot of when interviewees are answering questions is that many people will answer a question by saying, okay, I did this in my research, and then I did that, then I did this, and then I did this, and then finally I did that. All of that is stuff that's very concrete, factual. You did all those things. That's good. That there's some importance to that. But if your entire answer is that, the interviewer is not going to learn anything about you as a person and as a professional from that. They learn something about you, but they don't learn everything that they want to learn about you. So interviewing is revealing the depth of who you are as a person, as a professional, and revealing something about yourself. So if, for example, you did an experience, let's say you were involved in some sort of community service. Well, you want to spend part of your answer being very concrete. Okay, I took part in this activity because I wanted to do blah, blah, blah. And in this experience, I did X, Y, and Z. But you want to end this answer by talking about the meaning of that experience to you. What impact did it have on you? How did it contribute to your growth? How did you impact others through that experience? That's the part that reveals things about you. And that's where you need balance in your answers. The 5th tip I want to share with you is, as you're preparing for these interviews, you're going to see a lot of interview questions out there, hundreds upon hundreds. And it's going to feel overwhelming. I know when I was a residency applicant, I felt overwhelmed by the number of questions out there, and I didn't even have the internet. So I can only imagine what today's applicant feels, but I know from talking with so many applicants over the years that people get frightened and overwhelmed by all the questions out there. And I'm about to tell you something that's going to really help you. There's not as many questions out there as it seems. Many questions are simply a variation of the same question. And if you can recognize that it's a variation of something you're already prepared for, you will feel much, much better. And in fact, if you understand this concept, it will streamline your preparation because you can categorize similar questions together. And if you can do that, then when you get asked something that sounds a little different, it suddenly doesn't sound like a completely new question. So to give you an example of what I mean by that, a very common question that you're going to be asked again and again is, why are you interested in our residency program? Now, I can ask that question in a lot of different ways. I can say, why did you apply to our program? I can say, describe your ideal residency program. I might say, what do you believe our program would give you that another program would not? What interests you most about our program? Tell me what you know about our program. Why do you want to be a resident here? How do you view our program? What 2 or 3 things are most important to you in a residency program? Now, on the surface, these seem different, but they're really the same question. They're a variation of the base question, which is, why are you interested in our residency program? So I want you, as you're preparing and you're encountering hundreds upon hundreds of questions, I want you to categorize those into groups, which will make things much, much easier and a lot less frightening. Tip number 6 is to bring energy to the interview. So when I interview real life situations for our residency program or mock interviews. Many applicants, again, doesn't matter what applicant type you are, whether a USMD, DO, IMG, fail to bring energy to the interview. Now, it's harder to bring energy to the interview nowadays than it once was, because in the old days, all these interviews were in person. Now, most of these interviews are virtual. And so when you're trying to demonstrate energy in an interview, we do that not only through what we say, so that's our verbal communication, but also through what our body language communicates. So that's our nonverbal communication. In a virtual interview, we can't communicate fully with our body because they can only see a little bit of us, right? From the upper chest on up. And so we're somewhat limited in how to bring that energy through our body language, but whatever we have at our disposal, we have to maximize. So that includes our eye contact, our posture, the way we modulate our voice, so the delivery, the inflection, tone of voice, all of those things are very important. And one of my colleagues, Dr. Patrick Duff, Associate Dean at the University of Florida, he provides a very apt quote here. When I reviewed the interview performance of over 200 students who applied for our obstetrics and gynecology training program in the last 5 years, the single biggest reason for a low interview score was did not appear interested, no spark. So remember to bring the energy. Tip number 7, don't let the interviewer's demeanor throw you off. Now, what does this mean? So you're basically going to meet 2 types of interviewers. The first type are those people who are very warm and friendly. They're very bubbly, they smile a lot. That's the first type. The second type are your serious interviewers. They're very stern, stoic. They don't crack a smile. These types of interviewers can really affect an interviewee. And so I want you to remember that the way that they appear has no bearing on how they're receiving your answer. So many people have told me over the years that, Dr. Desai, this interview did not go well. My interviewer never smiled. I just didn't sense that I connected with him or her. And they match there. Okay. The opposite is also true. Dr. Desai, I had a great experience. She was so friendly. We were talking and laughing, and they don't match there. So the point here is the interviewer's demeanor does not have great bearing on how they're receiving your answers, because doctors can have very different personalities. I have doctors who are my colleagues who sit on selection committees, very, very serious. They could love your answer and not show it. But if you are looking for some sort of validation from them and you're not getting it, and then you start to think I'm not doing well, that's where the danger comes. So what I want you all to do is focus on creating the best answers that you can. Answers that are specific and unique to you, that will be compelling to programs and different types of interviewers, regardless of whether they're warm and friendly or serious and stern. And if you achieve that and you practice and you can deliver those types of answers, you have to believe in those answers. And then you should not be swayed by the way they look. This is one of the biggest reasons why interviews fail, is that interviewees are looking for some sort of validation from an interviewer. And I'm here to tell you, you're not often going to get it. So you have to have confidence in your answers. And that comes through prep. And if you have that confidence and you put in the time and energy, you created those unique answers that are compelling, you are going to resonate with that interviewer. And it doesn't matter what they look like. So remember that. It's a very, very important take-home point. Tip number 8 is about practicing pausing. You may not have heard about this through your prep so far, but it's really, really important to pause in your practice. Why am I saying this? Because there's going to be a time where you're going to be asked a question you're not sure about how to answer. Again, it could be a variation of a question you've already prepared for, but you may not be recognizing it in that moment. So to you, it may seem completely out of the blue and a foreign question. Or no matter how extensively you prepare, it's just a question that you haven't covered. Now remember, no matter how much we prepare, somebody could ask us something that we aren't ready to answer. In those cases, we have to pause. We have to give ourselves a moment to think. And I advocate giving yourself 5 to 10 seconds. Now, the way you do this in a real interview situation is you say, Dr. Smith, that's a great question. Do you mind if I have a moment to think about it? Dr. Smith will then say yes. And then you give yourself 5 or 10 seconds to think. Okay? Now, if you don't practice this strategy and you utilize a pause for the first time in a real life interview, chances are you're going to fill that 5 to 10 seconds with, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, I don't know the answer to this question, not sure what I should say. You won't be using it productively. But if you practice pausing before a real interview and you practice it regularly, that 5 to 10 seconds, you'll be much more composed. So in a real life interview situation, when that happens, you're more likely to use those 5 to 10 seconds far more productively and come up with a better answer than what you would have given if you just jumped into the answer. So remember, practice pausing. Now, related to the pause, because usually we're going to pause, right, when we get asked something that's a tough question. Let's say you're in an interview and you get asked a tough question. You have to remember that one question is very unlikely to damage you. Okay? But what is much more common is if you have what you think is a suboptimal answer to a question, it's common for an interviewee to keep that in their head, to keep dwelling on it. And if you keep perseverating over whatever it is that happened, then it prevents you from putting your best foot forward with all the other questions that they're asking you. And so it has this carryover effect that can really hurt the rest of your interview performance. So if you get asked a question that's tough, you're not prepared for, you're going to do your best. You're going to pause. You're going to think. You're going to try to come up with the best that you can. But then after that, you have to let it go so that you can be ready to do well in the other questions, which may be all questions that you have prepared for. So remember this key point, let the past go. And also remember that if it's a hard question for you, chances are it's a hard question for most everybody else. So keep that in mind. The 10th tip is when you're creating your answers, I want you to recognize that you are unique. Nobody has walked in your shoes. The experiences you've had are your own. Yes, you may have had some other students who've done it with you, but what you felt in that experience is not the same thing as somebody else felt. So when you're crafting your answers, I want you to really dig deep, going back to that reflection exercise, that analysis exercise where you're trying to find content that's going to be specific to you. Because if you can do that, your answer will truly be your own. It won't sound like other people's. And that's what's really, really important in interviewing. In 25 years of interviewing, Again, it doesn't matter your applicant type, USMD, DOIMG. It is remarkable that people often sound the same. So what I want you to do is, after you create your answer, I want you to take a step back and evaluate yourself with one important question. That question is, can someone else answer the question in the same way? If your answer to that is yes, all that means is you haven't yet found the right answer. You may be on track to find the right answer, but you just have room to make it stronger. So don't settle for an answer that would make you sound like everyone else. Because people sound largely the same, they lose out on an opportunity to stand out. So the metric you should be using to evaluate your answers is, can somebody else say the exact same thing? The answer is yes. That means a little more work is needed to make this answer even better. Okay, now I'm going to move on to your questions. And as I said, we received some questions about interviewing, but also questions about other topics. So I'm going to try to go through those questions now. So we received a question about attending conferences, and the question specifically asked, how useful is attending conferences like AHA, American Heart Association, to network for someone applying for internal medicine? So the answer to that is, conferences can be very, very helpful. They are the best means to do extensive networking. In a conference, you have so many people all under one roof, and that is an advantage, because the process of networking outside of a conference takes time, takes effort, which is not to say it doesn't take time and effort in a conference. But again, because you have everybody in one place, it's often easier to make some headway with multiple people by going to a conference. And conferences like the AHA, which include people from so many institutions that you have likely applied to and hope to get interviews at, can be a great venue to meet people with ties to those programs. Now, before you go to a conference, you want to be strategic about how you're going to utilize the conference. So one of the things that I find particularly helpful is the poster hall, because in the poster hall, you're going to have people representing different institutions standing in front of their posters, just waiting for an opportunity to talk to attendees about the work that they've done. Now, usually conference will release the posters that are going to be exhibited during different poster hall sessions in advance of the conference. So you can look and see, who are these presenters, what institutions do they represent, and if you want to form a tie with somebody at a particular institution, you can target that particular presenter. And so that is one way that a conference can really help move your networking forward. We had some questions about research. So someone asked, how important is a research paper in our CV? How much do publications matter in order to obtain a residency? So they do matter, but how much they matter depends upon a lot of different factors. So first, it's about the specialty you're applying to. So some specialties place a higher premium on research than others. In general, the more competitive the specialty is, the more important research is going to play. So when we're talking about specialties like neurosurgery or orthopedic surgery or otolaryngology, these are some of our most competitive specialties. A strong record in research is going to be essential in order to obtain a match in these specialties for any applicant type. But for other specialties, research may not be that important. For example, right now, if you look at from a competitive standpoint, we might put specialties like family medicine and pediatrics lower on the list of competitiveness. And when we look at surveys of program directors in these specialties about the importance of different residency selection criteria, research is way down lower on the list. And so people can match into these types of specialties with minimal to even no research. So people do match in these specialties without any publications or presentations. Now, if you're looking to publish something, because this is part of the question this individual had, there's many different ways to do it. I'm just going to briefly just mention internal medicine, since I know a lot of our attendees here today may be looking at internal medicine as a residency. But this time of the year, I would encourage you, those of you who are thinking about internal medicine, to consider some of the more interesting cases you have encountered either in rotations you've done with us or in other settings. Because our three major societies of internal medicine, the American College of Physicians, or ACP, the Society of Hospital Medicine, or SHM, or the Society of General Internal Medicine, or SGIM, they all have conferences in April, May. And in November and December, they have deadlines for submissions of either research or clinical vignettes. Each of them has a category for submissions in clinical vignettes. And we have had some of our rotators submit cases from their experiences with us for those conferences and have had them accepted. So if you are looking for a publication and you have had an interesting case, that's one way to go about doing it. Of course, there are many other ways to get publications that goes beyond the focus of today's webinar, but I'm always happy to talk about other ways to get published with anybody who would like to talk about it. But just wanted to throw out that nugget about internal medicine right now, since it's here in October and those deadlines for those three conferences are coming in November and December. So that's something you can check out. So is it possible to match without a research paper to our name? Yes, to some extent that depends on the specialty. And it also depends upon what programs you're targeting within a specialty, because remember, some programs are more research oriented or intensive than other programs. Other than research papers, what can we do to enhance our CV? There's a lot of things you can do to boost your CV. It's not only research. We're interested in such things as community service, community outreach, teaching, mentorship, leadership, advocacy, and the list goes on. What I would encourage all of you to do is to think about how you can get involved in different things. Because remember, earlier in our webinar, we talked about how each program has its own mission. So very small percentage of, again, we'll just use internal medicine as an example, are looking to produce the next generation of researchers. But there are internal medicine programs that are looking to develop clinician educators. There are programs that are interested in community outreach, so they might be very interested in applicants with a background in community outreach. So the more well-rounded you are, the more you can appeal to a wider range of programs. We had a question about the primary care track. Somebody said, what is a primary care track? So the primary care track in internal medicine is a track that helps trainees become generalists. And so there is a lot in common between a primary care track and a categorical track in internal medicine, but you're going to have more months in the outpatient setting. And that may be great for you if you're considering a career as a generalist. And by that I mean general internal medicine or outpatient medicine. And they have particular parts of that primary care track that will help you achieve that goal. Now, we had a question about, if you go after the primary care track, is that going to be detrimental to your fellowship opportunities in internal medicine in the future? And the answer to that is generally no. And the reason for that is because many primary care tracks allow you to, I'm not going to say all, but many will allow you to change your track if your interests change. Okay? Even if the program doesn't allow you to move from primary care into categorical, you can still do pretty much everything you need to do to make yourself attractive for fellowship that you would have done in a categorical position. A lot about getting into fellowship is about developing relationships with subspecialty faculty, getting involved in research in the subspecialty department, and your overall clinical performance throughout all of your rotations. So all of that can be done even in a primary care track, because a lot of primary care tracks have outpatient experiences in subspecialties like cardiology, rheumatology, what have you. And the research that you do with a subspecialty department can occur whether you're doing primary care track or categorical track. Those are things that you do outside of your day-to-day clinical care. So if you desire to go into a fellowship, you can still get there through the primary care track, but you may not enjoy that as much if you're committed 100% to a fellowship, because again, there's a lot more outpatient there than there is inpatient. And that may not be aligned with what you're interested in. We had questions about the letter of interest. So first, let's talk about what a letter of interest is. So a letter of interest is a form of pre-interview communication that takes place between the time you submit your application and the time that interviews are given out. And the hope is by sending a letter of interest that you will draw the interest of the program and they will consider you, and perhaps that letter of interest might propel them to give you an interview invitation. Now, letters of interest have been around for a while. Opinions about them are getting a bit more mixed, especially in the last few years as program signaling has come into play. And so before you send a letter of interest, you have to check the program's website, their social media, whatever source of information you have about a program, to make sure that they have not released information saying that we don't want letters of interest. You are starting to see more of that on program websites. So if you come across that, do not send a letter of interest. Absent that, you can consider sending a letter of interest. If you are going to send a letter of interest, I would recommend starting with your signaled programs. And then if you've marked a geographic preference, working your way through programs in those geographic regions. Again, always double checking to make sure that they don't want letters of interest. As far as when is the appropriate time to send letters of interest, it really depends upon when the programs invite people for interview. Generally, programs will invite people for interview in the latter part of October and November. Yes, there are some that might start inviting people for interviews earlier, like the early part of October, but most of these programs are doing it on a rolling basis. And so they do need some time to get through these. And so in the early part of October, for example, there's a lot of communications that programs are receiving. So sometimes letters of interest can get lost in that sea of communication. So there's not a perfect way to know the right timing. But if you see any language on these websites saying, okay, this is when we're going to offer our interviews, that can give you some guidance on when to send the letters of interest. Now, as far as what it should include, it should be something specific that shows your interest in the program and demonstrates fit between you and the program. It should not be super long. It should not be generic. If the program gets a letter of interest that looks like this letter of interest was sent to every program that the applicant applied to, it's not going to be as effective. So it has to be thoughtful and show specific interest and ideally some fit between you and the program. Now, we did have a question about a letter of intent. Now, a letter of intent is different than a letter of interest. Letter of intent is a form of post-interview communication that takes place after you've interviewed at a program, but before the program ranks their applicants. And the idea is that the applicant is sending this letter expressing intent, their desire to be a trainee in that program. So the question that we were asked, what do you think about letters of intent? I've been told by a resident to submit more than one, but this doesn't seem honest. Do they even make a difference? So let me answer the last question first. Do they even make a difference? It depends. So there is evidence that shows that they can influence your place on the rank list for some programs. Is it the majority of programs? No, but it's not an insignificant percentage of programs. So do I recommend sending them? As long as a program doesn't say we don't want letters of intent, it is perfectly fine to send a letter of intent, but I advocate for only sending a letter of intent to your top ranked program. Because in the letter of intent, you ideally want to say to that program, hey, you're my number one ranked program. And that's not something you want to do to multiple programs because you're not being truthful and sincere. And I feel that honesty is always the best policy. Sometimes programs talk with one another. So there's always that risk if you send multiple letters of intent telling a program that they're your number one choice, that you could be found out. And that, of course, would be disastrous. So I would not recommend sending more than one. Networking. Should we reach out to residents at programs we've got interviews? This all depends. If you have established relationships already with people that at programs where you've received interviews, there's nothing wrong with reaching out to them and connecting and saying, hey, I'm so excited. I got an interview at the program. Just thought I'd, just touch base with you. And you might get on a call with them and they might give you a little bit of overview. But you don't want to overstep. You don't want to come across as the applicant who's trying to get, some nitty gritty information that, a program doesn't, want their residents to release. It may make the resident uncomfortable, and there's always a chance that that resident might, take it the wrong way. So you've got to be a little bit careful when you're talking to residents at programs where we've got interviews. If you haven't developed a relationship with a resident or a program, you have to ask yourself, what's your purpose in reaching out to the resident? If your purpose is, I just want to learn more about the program, I think that's perfectly fine. You could do that. You'll also be able to learn more about the program from the residents on the interview day, or even after the program interview is over, because they'll often allow you access to residents for any follow-up questions. So this all depends on what your purpose is. We have questions about the USMLE. The first question is, I had an attempt on my USMLE. I did not talk about it in my personal statement. If I do have to talk about it in an interview, how do I approach it? So, first of all, if you have any concerns in your background, whether it's USMLE or otherwise, you have to be ready to talk about it in an interview. Now, some interviewers will directly ask you about this, and others might not. I'm a big believer that if you have a major area of concern, like a STEP attempt, that it's far better for you to be proactive and bring it up with the interviewer than to not say anything at all with the interviewer. The reason I say that is I've sat on enough residency selection committees where we talk about applicants, and sometimes applicants with areas of concern are discussed in the committee as a group. And somebody will raise some concern, and somebody in the committee will say, oh, Dr. Jones, I see you were one of 2 interviewers who interviewed this applicant. So what did you learn about their attempt? Now, if Dr. Jones didn't ask you about the attempt, nor did you share any information about it, Dr. Jones isn't going to be able to shed any light whatsoever. So I believe that you need to be proactive if the interviewer doesn't bring it up, because I want you to look at the interviewer as your strongest advocate for that residency selection committee. And so if they're armed with the right information, they can diffuse any concerns that the selection committee will have. So Dr. Jones, if he knew what happened, would be able to say, oh, I appreciate you asking me this. I had a long conversation with her about this attempt. And you know what? This is what happened. And I don't think it should be something that defines her. I feel like she's had a lot of growth from it. So he's able to say something about it because he's aware of it and he's able to talk about it. Now, I realize that it's uncomfortable to talk about things that have happened that don't put you in good light. But there is a lot to be said about how someone responds to hardship and adversity, the growth that people experience, the resilience that people develop. And if you can create a mature answer to whatever that setback was and be able to effectively communicate that to an interviewer, that's going to go a long way in helping them advocate for you. Remember, the interviewer, regardless of whether they asked you about something or not, has to rate you for your interview performance. And whatever that red flag is in your background, they may have to rate you in that area. So if you can address it with them, you may just receive a higher rating for that particular area. Second question related to the USMLE was, I just received my Step 3 results this week and resent them to every program via ERAS. However, I know if a program has downloaded my application, then they will not see this update. Is it okay to send an email with my Step 3 results to the program? If so, should this be sent to the PD or the PC? So if you have an update, definitely send an email with the Step 3 results to the program and send it to both the program coordinator and the program director. We had a question about U.S. clinical experience. How can I tell if a U.S. clinical experience is good or not? Is there any criteria for it? So this is a very good question. So how do I define a good U.S. clinical experience? So a lot of it stems from the person you're working with. So we're talking about the preceptor or attending that you're going to be with. Ideally, you want to work with somebody who's an excellent role model in many different spheres. First, they should be somebody who give their patients the highest quality of care, who go all out for their patients. Because if you can work with someone like that, you get to see what that looks like here in a US context. And that's what we all deserve, because we all aspire to be that type of physician. So seeing that in action can be life-changing. Second, we want somebody who's invested in you as a student, as a learner, as a future doctor. So we have many doctors who are excellent clinicians, but they may not have the heart or the space for teaching. They may not be as invested in their students because that may not be their highest priority. So it's very important to select somebody who's an excellent clinician and role model, but not just on the clinical side, but from a teaching side. So much of a US clinical experience is based on the person. Now, what else is important? You want to be part of something, okay? I can't tell you when I was a medical student how often I had experiences where I was not integrated into a team. So that affected my learning. That affected my enjoyment of the experience. So you want an experience where the preceptor has thought very carefully about how to integrate you into the team and to the experience and have you actively involved. Because if you're integrated and actively involved, you're building and refining those skills, creating that foundation for your future. And that's going to help you not only for the purposes of getting into residency, but for transitioning into residency and being successful. If you select the right US clinical experience, it can make a huge difference in the way that you will transition into residency and how you will be received by your residency faculty right from the start. In addition, you want a preceptor who is, as I said, invested in you, but invested enough in you that wants to get to know you well enough that they can write you a meaningful letter of recommendation, right? When we do these experiences, we're hoping to get a strong letter of recommendation. So that person needs to be invested in doing that for you. Now, that means you have to bring your A game to the experience. But if you bring your A game to the experience, that person needs to want to do that for you. And not everybody's wired that way. I'll give you my own story. So this is a story from my early days as a faculty member, when I was a junior faculty member. I was about 5 or 6 years into my current position here at Baylor. And I was grateful to be nominated by one of our faculty members for a teaching award. And as part of the application for the teaching award, I have to submit letters from other faculty that knew me well. And so I reached out to some of the faculty, I collected some letters, and in this application, we were able to see the letters of recommendation. And so of the 3 letters, I had 2 that were really well written, very, very detailed, and a third one that was 3 lines long. And I remember when I received the letter that was 3 lines long, I was absolutely dumbfounded by that, because this particular faculty member was very well regarded, excellent clinician, but this underscores this point that they have to be invested in writing the letter that you deserve. Now, what are some things that people look at and attach too much importance to for USCE? So the first thing that people attach too much importance to is the institution name. Okay? It's far more important about the person. So if you're going to go to Harvard, that can be a great experience if you're with the right person. Okay? I know plenty of people at Harvard, Emory, UCLA, Northwestern, where I did my residency, Baylor, where I'm a faculty member. We're great clinicians, but if you're with them, they may be far more into research, and they may not be as invested in the student. Okay. I also know great people at Baylor who are great researchers, great clinicians, who are totally invested in their students. So it's all about the person, and it's not as much about the institution. There's this belief that if you just go to this institution, you're going to get a great letter of recommendation. That's not necessarily true, as my example tells you. So don't make it as much about the institution as it is the person. Now, part of the challenge is when you're applying to an institution like Baylor for a rotation, or Emory, or UIC, or any university, you can't control who you're going to work with in most cases. You'll be assigned to a service, and that's where the luck of the draw comes in. The other challenge sometimes with university rotations is you don't know how long you'll be working with someone. So at many universities, attendings switch off at 1 to 2 week intervals. Okay, so at Baylor, I just finished a rotation where I was on only for 1 week. So I was with my team only for 1 week. I'm about to start a rotation on Monday where I'll be there just for 2 weeks. Now, in the old days, I used to be there for a month. But now at most academic centers and universities, attendings switch off at 1 to 2 weeks, which makes it a bit more difficult to develop a long-term relationship, which would net you a stronger letter. So you kind of have to factor in a lot of these different things when deciding what's a good USCE. Okay. Now, our belief is it should be about the person. So if you have had a senior or alumnus who's rotated at Emory and they worked in a certain department, they had a great experience with a particular professor, then go after that professor. See if you can rotate with that professor, because you have a firsthand account that was a great experience. So regardless of where this is, university, community hospital, outpatient practice, it's the person that makes the difference. Another question we got asked is about letters of recommendation. What is a strong letter of recommendation? How can I get it? So in order to get a strong letter of recommendation, you have to bring to your rotation the best that you can bring. So there's some qualities, right, that we're looking for in our future residents. We're looking for a strong work ethic. We're looking for a teamwork. We're looking for a hunger to learn. We're looking for communication skills. The list goes on. But you want to demonstrate those things in your clinical experiences. And this is where being integrated into the team, having opportunities to take part in different things, allows you to highlight those qualities or skills. What's also important when you do a rotation is that you take an active role in soliciting feedback. Now, you'll often get feedback on the things that you're doing. You may not appreciate that as feedback, but when an attending comments on, your history, oh, you thought about, these 5 things in differential, but don't forget to consider the 6th thing. So you're getting feedback day to day, and you need to appreciate that feedback, incorporate it, and grow from those experiences. But you also need to get what we call more formal feedback at the halfway point. And we're big believers in that. And if you can get that feedback at the halfway point, that gives you an idea of, what you're doing in terms of your progress, like what has been progressing well, and what areas do you have to target. So you have a whole 2 weeks to continue your growth in those areas. And that effort leads to a stronger performance over time. And that leads to a stronger letter of recommendation. Now, another aspect of a strong letter of recommendation is the concept of being collaborative with your preceptor. So I'm a big believer in my view that the most meaningful letters come from both parties coming together. Some of my Baylor medical students will rotate with me 1 year before they apply for residency, sometimes 1.5 years, occasionally 2 years. And they'll come to me a couple months before residency applications are due, and they'll say, hey, Dr. Desai, can you write me a letter of recommendation? And I'm happy to do that because I remember them. I'm happy to support them. But some of the details are not fresh in my mind because a year has passed and I have had other students. So I ask them to complete a questionnaire. So they complete a questionnaire, and I find some very useful information that helps me write that draft. And so what I would encourage you all to do is to keep a record in your rotations of the things you're doing, the patients you're seeing, the qualities you're demonstrating, the skills you're developing, and be very specific in maintaining this record. And then when it comes time to ask for that letter, when you give your letter writer your CV, you can also give them a page or 2 of bulleted points of things that you did during the rotation that will jog his or her memories and allow for a more meaningful letter to be written. So all of that is important in getting that strong letter of recommendation. Now, when you're trying to get a strong letter of recommendation, it's important that you strategize your rotations properly, because we don't want you to put yourself in a situation where you're not ready to impress, and that happens a lot. So we see applicants who start off with an ICU rotation at University of South Florida. Well, the ICU rotation is one of the hardest rotations that you could possibly do. And if you're completely new to the US and that's your first rotation, what are the chances that you're going to be at your peak level in your first rotation in the hardest rotation you can imagine? Not very high. So I think when you're planning your rotations, you need to be thinking about, how do I plan these rotations in a way that I have proper growth so that I can earn strong letters of recommendation, that I'm not doing something that I shouldn't necessarily be doing too soon because I'm not yet ready to show my true abilities. So that's another thing to think about. So second question related to letters of recommendation. Is it feasible to ask for a letter of recommendation this year, then use a token for 2 years until my cycle of match? I'm planning to get matched in 2027, 2028. So the answer is you can, absolutely. You can move it over from cycle to cycle. Now, the only problem with that is that some programs might want more recent letters around the time that you're going to be applying in September of 2027. So that is the only thing that could be an issue. But if you do something more recent to your application submission, that will also help you with those programs. Okay, now residency interview. What are good questions to ask at the end of an interview? I'm going to share with you a couple of podcast episodes, one for family medicine, one for internal medicine, where I go over how to create questions to ask of an interviewer at the end of an interview. What qualities do most programs look for in a candidate during an interview? This is very similar to, how to shine during a rotation. In addition to what we said earlier, I want you to look at the program's website for any specific language about what they're looking for. So often programs will right on their website, we are looking for X, Y, and Z in our future residents. So that gives you an idea what they're looking for and allows you to tailor some of your interview answers to those qualities that they are highlighting. How do I prepare for interviews? That is coming up here in just a sec. So interview prep resources. So most of you have our book, The Successful Match. Those of you who have recently started rotating with us, you'll be getting that very, very soon. In that book, there's over 150 plus pages of interview prep. Very, very detailed information. Will give you a boost to your interview prep. So I would encourage you to read through those chapters. Now, we have two websites. So you're familiar with MD2B Connect, but our sister website is called thesuccessfulmatch.com. Remember to put in thesuccessfulmatch.com, because if you put in successfulmatch.com, you'll be on a dating website. So thesuccessfulmatch.com, you click on the blog there, and in the blog search engine, you put in residency interview. You're going to get a whole collection of articles, a lot of articles that complement what's in the book. These go beyond the standard advice that you typically see, so it will give you significant advantage and edge in your preparation. And there on the same website, there is the Success in Medicine podcast, and you can access different podcast episodes on residency interviewing. To give you some examples of some articles on the blog, I know Alyssa maybe have shared some of these with you. One of the blog posts is about what should I do if I don't know the answer to a question, how to respond to the common question, why are you interested in our residency program? What if an interviewer asks illegal questions? Some others, the 275 most common residency interview questions. That is a great blog post because we categorize those in terms of similar questions, like we were talking about before. Questions to ask residency program directors during a residency interview. That's a very informative blog post. So a lot of blog posts there. Podcasts. So this is what I was talking to you about. There's a podcast episode called Internal Medicine Residency Interview, Questions to Ask Your Interviewer. There's another one similarly titled for the Family Medicine Residency Interview. And finally, on that website, thesuccessfulmatch.com, there's a residency interview course. Feedback that we've gotten from our course participants over the last few years have informed us that it's given them, allowed them to give a strong interview performance. So we've had a number of people with 1 or 2 interviews who have commented on the course really made their answers stand out, and they matched it to their programs. So regardless of how many interviews you get, this is another resource that you may find extremely useful in helping you develop standout answers. The whole focus of the course is on making you develop compelling answers that don't sound like other people. So that's another thing you could check out. And with that, we come to the end. So Alyssa, I will hand it over to you.
Okay, great. I know that I have put a lot of links and resources in the chat. So if you want to go ahead and save those and click on those, please go ahead and do so now. In the meantime, I will go ahead and close us off. So thank you very much for all of you for joining us for our webinar series, Residency Real Talk with Dr. Samir Desai. We are so happy to have all of you guys here tonight and answer some of your questions. I know that some of your questions we might not have been able to get to, and there was a couple questions in the chat that we weren't able to get to. Highly encourage you guys to reach out to us on our team. We're all here to help you, and we want you to succeed. So please feel free to reach out to us directly about anything. It could be, question from tonight. If you have a question, after this webinar, if there's, something that you're stressed about, anything, we are here for you and we want you to succeed. So please feel free to reach out to us. Obviously you also have your client services representatives that you could reach out to as well. And you'll have Dr. Samir Desai's number as well. So please feel free to reach out to us. And I think for the most part, that is it. So I will pass it over to Dr. Desai for some final remarks.
Okay, thank you, Alyssa, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. Great questions that you all submitted. And I just want to echo one last time everything Alyssa said. For us, it's not just about you in a rotation. We're here to support you in other ways. So for me, that means that I want you to feel comfortable reaching out to any of us, including myself. So most of you have my direct line. For those of you who are new to our program, I'll be reaching out to you soon. So we will be having a chance to talk about your particular situation. But don't hesitate to reach out. You're not alone. We're here rooting for you every step of the way, and we're happy to help. So with that, I will wish you a very good night.
Thank you so much for joining again, and we wish you all a great night. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.